But as we get older, we need to find what's the minimum that we need to do to stay healthy, to stay strong, to maintain muscle. But we've got to be able to recover, because that's the biggest shift that we have to be aware of, is our recovery potential is so much less as we get older, and we don't have those hormones optimized that are going to help us with the muscle recovery and the hydration and the hormones and all the things.
On today's episode, I am so excited to have Dr. Tiff here with me to talk about all things midlife health, body composition change. How do we really help ourselves feel our best in this midlife health season? And so, Dr. Tiff, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, Erin, I've been waiting for this. It's been a long time coming, so I'm excited to chat.
It has been a long time coming. And, you know, we have a lot in common. We serve a similar audience. We have a similar passion for how do we cut through the noise in the wellness space? How do we simplify the messaging? How do we help people really dig into information we can trust and lean on when it comes to our longevity health? And so I'd love to start with kind of going into your background a little bit and your story. What led you to what you do now? And tell us a little bit about, you know, the work you do and why you're so passionate.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, I think for me, where I am in my career now, I spent so many years thinking I knew the right way. And I was even in this industry, and I have degrees in this, and I understand the body at a very deep level, but I found myself constantly unsatisfied, and I chased that scale, and I trained harder, and I restricted more food, and I just found myself playing this game that never seemed to have an end. Yeah. And I ended up just really driving my body into the ground. I was tired all the time. I've had several injuries that have really forced me to modify how I train and give up things I loved. And I just don't want anyone else to have to go through that. And so I stepped back and I reevaluated and I reprioritized, and I said, I say I want to be strong. I'm not strong. I'm weak and broken. I say I want to be resilient. I say I want to be an advocate of health, and I'm starving my body and training myself into the ground. And I just felt so disconnected from the message I wanted to send, and the person, the woman that I wanted to be, and the way I was like really treating my body. And so I just want to flip that script. And I think, like you said, you and I have that same mission of just giving women permission to be resilient, be strong, focus on something other than that number that is just so daunting.
So daunting. You're hitting the nail on the head as far as the work harder mentality. And I know that so many women struggle with that. Like, we just need to work harder. We just need to be more disciplined. We just need to run our bodies ragged in order to get to this place of results.
This is the only way to do it. Yeah.
Right. And we've all been conditioned into that for one way or another. Mm-hmm. And I love having open, honest conversations like this, because there is this tremendously better, more powerful way that serves our physiology with such an intentional practice, but also like helps our longevity health tenfold. And that's really what I want you to kind of dig in today. So one of the things I would love to start with, Tiff, is talking a little bit about just like the key physiological shifts that happen for women that often go ignored, that aren't talked about, that we aren't educated about when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to movement, when it comes to mindset and actually nurturing our longevity health. Yeah. Talk about what you see in your work as far as those shifts go, and maybe what you've seen as far as how they're ignored and how we can help women really start to get in tune with that.
Yeah, I think that two of the biggest takeaways that I've started to see just as my client base has become more in that perimenopause, menopause, and I've become that as well. Being 44, it's like I now know how my body, and that, you know, when we go through it personally, the experience is different. My body needs less to get the same impact.
Yeah.
And the term I like to use is minimum effective dose.
Yes.
And I think we chase max volume.
Yeah.
HIIT training and crazy diets and all the extremes because they're a challenge and they're so intriguing and everybody's doing it. But as we get older, we need to find what's the minimum that we need to do to stay healthy, to stay strong, to maintain muscle. But we've got to be able to recover, because that's the biggest shift that we have to be aware of, is our recovery potential is so much less as we get older, and we don't have those hormones optimized that are going to help us with the muscle recovery and the hydration and the hormones and all the things. And so I think it's down regulating. It's like, you've got to find your threshold, and yours is going to be different than mine.
Yeah.
Right. So unfortunately, I can't say here's the formula, but I think you've got to kind of push and pull back and push a little bit and pull back and find what's the most I can do without going over that threshold to where adrenal fatigue sets in, to where stress and cortisol levels go shooting up, where your body's sore all the time, or you can't keep up food wise, right? Because the other side of training is nutrition.
Yeah.
So when we train, we then got to feed our workouts appropriately. So you've got to find, what can I do and recover? And then on the flip side, obviously, what does my body need to be able to nourish that workout, to be able to give it what it needs to build that muscle or maintain whatever your goals may be.
Yeah. And that's such a great point. And I love that you position it as minimum effective dose, or the minimal effective dose, because we don't always give ourselves permission to kind of get into that headspace. And to your point, we think it always has to be balls to the wall, hit training forever in order to have a quote unquote effective training session or workout. And so when you think about, like, physiologically, when you're talking to clients or you're talking to other women or people you work with, like, what do you help them start to tune into in order to know, like, they're at their effective dose or they're pushing too far? Like, what are those symptoms, or what is their body potentially telling them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we chase soreness. I think there's some soreness that's natural, especially if you're trying a new workout or you've added a different movement in, or maybe you're just trying, a new class or something. So it's hard to look at soreness, but I do think you don't want it lingering, right? Like, you shouldn't be sore all the time. Like, I have clients to be like, I'm sore every day. Everything hurts every day. Like, that's probably more than your body needs.
Yeah.
And so I do think you have to be aware of that. I think sleep disruption is a great indicator. Heart rate, if you have a heart rate monitor, if you have a device, best time to do that is very first thing in the morning, right when you wake up. If you're seeing spikes in resting heart rate, that tends to be an overtraining symptom. So maybe take a baseline and then just be monitoring, is your heart rate, your natural resting heart rate, staying in a pretty consistent range? So I think you can get some good data on that. And then I think intuition, I think women especially are really good at it, just ignoring our body telling us that we need rest. And I'm the captain of that team.
Yeah.
So I know very well, it's like, I know I should rest today, but I really want to go to that spin class, or I really want to go, or I got to get my steps in. And then my body will flare up. My hip will start bothering me, or my back will be sore, right? So I do think usually our bodies are talking to us.
Yes, they talk to us all the time. And as women, we do a good job of kind of ignoring that, because we're pushing through, empowering through in so many areas of our life. And I love that you're just speaking to, like, these are the physical signs or symptoms that are important to kind of pay attention to. One of my mentors says all the time that midlife women especially just need to get to this place where we chill out a little bit, right? We kind of let ourselves get to this place of letting our body lead a little more and getting in tune with, how do we really figure out what's serving us and what's not? And we do that by just getting more aware and being honest about, the activities that are working and the activities that are not, and kind of getting into this place of letting go of certain things or building into new things, and just knowing that that's okay. Like, it's part of the overall evolution of health. And kind of calling back to what you said, the minimum effective dose can be different kinds of activities at different paces and different tempos and all kinds of things, where you can still get incredible results, but you're not going after it maybe in the strategy that you once used. And that's really what I want to continue to empower women with. And I know you do too, is like, how do we get to this place of training smarter, not harder?
Yeah.
And that's really the goal, especially as we nurture our longevity health. So I'd love to move a little bit into just the common hurdles, struggles, frustrations that women have along their health journey, especially as their health evolves and especially as we get into midlife. I'm sure you hear this all the time too, but women that I speak to are often really frustrated by lack of results, the body comp change they're after isn't coming. They have unexplained weight gain that they can't seem to pinpoint. They're just managing these symptoms that they really can't make sense of because maybe their habits haven't shifted that much. Their lifestyle is pretty much the same, but they are really getting things, quote unquote, wrong because they don't know how to actually tune into what their body needs or really feed their physiology in this season with intention. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about when it comes to body comp change or those frustrations that women often express. Like, where are the mistakes that you're seeing and where can we continue to be better when it comes to kind of chasing those kinds of goals?
Yeah. I think the biggest for me is that we're chasing our nutrition goals with the wrong sources. So,
Yep.
for example, protein is everywhere right now. I can't get online without seeing somebody talking about prioritize protein and make sure you're getting your protein and all the things. And I 100% agree with that. But that does not mean get it from pre-made protein shakes and protein chips and low carb tortillas that have protein. You've got to still get quality. And as we get older, I'm finding that shift makes a huge difference where when we're 25 and our hormones are optimized and everything's working and we've never dieted in our life and we don't have kids and careers and stress and all the things, we can get away with a little lesser quality. But I think that as we get older, our body just doesn't metabolize those highly processed foods the same. And I'm not a have to eat all organic and non-GMO and no red dyes and all the things. Like, I don't go on that side of the spectrum. But I do think we've got to shift back a little more to whole food and not go for convenience all the time, because I just don't think hitting your protein with those sources is the same as eating the appropriate amount of whole food protein.
Yeah.
Or carbs or fat, right? We got the low carb tortillas and all the things. You've got to try to get the most out of what you're eating. And I think that's a big shift. It's like people want to hit their macros, but you've got to hit them with the right types of foods and the right sources. And I think that makes a huge difference.
It does make a huge difference. And I love that you're kind of speaking to that, because we live in a fast-paced society where there's a lot of quick grab and go type options, which are wonderful. But when we start to rely on those as the main source of what we're doing all the time, it can become something that kind of backfires inside of our health and becomes something that doesn't really agree with our bodies and can be something that kind of throws us off of really getting to a place of creating body composition change, et cetera. And so one of the things you talked a little bit about is macronutrients and macro goals. And I've kind of learned this a little bit in my own journey, but I see it with women too. This idea of hitting specific macros and how that is the only or the best way to get to body comp change as the main message. And I've seen that kind of go both ways, kind of in the sense of like, how are you hitting macros? What foods are you utilizing to hit those macros? But then macros not even necessarily serving your physiology based on the season you're in, based on the stress you're dealing with, et cetera. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about kind of macronutrients and hitting body composition goals and just like kind of what you see or have coached through with the people you work with.
Sure. I mean, I certainly build a foundation of knowledge on macronutrients for all my clients, because I do think that you have to understand where your food is coming from, and you can't just look at calories. And if you've never looked at food on a deep level, you can't be intuitive because you don't know what you're being intuitive about.
Right.
So I think you do have to build an educational foundation to just understand, what does a portion look like? What's a carb? What's a fat? What's a protein? And how do I need to search for those and get them, make sure I'm getting that nutritional spectrum into my diet throughout the day? But I agree with you, there isn't one set that works for everyone. And it's kind of like the minimum effective dose. We still have to figure out, what is a calorie deficit for me, if that's my goal, to lose some body fat or change my composition in that way. Or maybe you don't need to be in a calorie deficit. You actually need to be in a calorie surplus and be building some muscle. So I think you've got to understand macronutrients, but the amounts and the manipulation of those macronutrients is such an individualized process that I would really warn folks of saying like, hey, Erin, what are your macros?
Yeah.
And just assuming like, or looking online, like, this is what I eat in a day, and looking at this woman that you want to maybe look like, but you have no idea what she does for training. You have no idea her history of dieting. You have no idea what her hormone situation is. So it would just really urge you to not do the comparison game or just grab information liberally offline and just use that as your macros. But I am a big fan of looking at food from at a macro level.
Yeah. And I love that you're speaking to essentially the idea of how we're all so bio-individual in our health. And that's one of the things that we have to embrace the older we get, but especially in midlife when we have hormonal fluctuation at play and we need to really get into, but what's going to serve my unique, personalized, bio-individual health journey?
Right.
Because it's so different from each of us. And so often in the wellness space with all the noise of all the things we should do or should buy or should adopt, we forget that we have to actually take a step back and think about, but what's going to serve me? And how do I get to this place of continuing to press forward towards my specific goals with a plan and a program and a structure that actually works with what my body needs? And so I love that you're talking about that, Tiff, of kind of like the science of understanding macronutrients, but also like using some intuition and also figuring out like what's going to really work for you. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of that concept. I know in your coaching work and in your background, you kind of blend science and intuitive eating and intuition into your coaching. Talk a little bit about, you know, if you come across clients who have tried all the things and feel a little burned out or are kind of in that all or nothing mindset related to macronutrients or nutrition or really working towards their goals, like how do you continue to coach them through that piece of the mindset puzzle and encourage them with, you know, different strategies to maybe try?
You know, I think we all probably inherently know where our preference is. Like if we look at keto as the very far left of the spectrum of low carb, and then we look at, you know, kind of the zone of 40, 30, 30, you know, so you've got just this, you know, kind of nutritional camps that are out there. And I think when you think about what foods do I crave? Do I crave nuts and avocados and salmons? Like, are those my like higher fat protein? You may do better on a higher fat, higher protein, a little lower carb spectrum, right? But if you sit back and you're somebody that craves pretzels and you crave more potatoes and rices and pastas and you like the carbs and you don't really, you'd rather have chicken or eat fish or leaner proteins, then you're probably somebody that doesn't need a low carb approach. And I think people try to put themselves in these boxes of what they think they should be eating, and they're fighting to get out of that box the whole time. Like, I really want some bread, I really want some pasta, but like, I'm not supposed to have it. And it's like, yes, you can. Like, maybe you need a little less fat and a little more carb, and calorically, you're still going to be fine. You're still going to be in your maintenance or deficit calorie intake. So it all still does come down to calories. You've just got to figure out what's the right combination for you that feels natural, that doesn't feel forced, because if you force it and you get to your goal, you're not going to be able to maintain it.
Yeah.
You're constantly going to feel like you're not in the right space. And that's where I think frustration sets in of like, I'm doing this thing and this is the only way I can get my results, but I hate it and I'm miserable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like that. I think that we can find our groove, but we just have to be willing to like forget all the noise and not just give, it's like no one approach is right for everyone. So
absolutely. And I love that you're talking about how we need all the macronutrients, because in women's health specifically, like we've been marketed to for so long of how we need to cut this out, we need to cut that out, or this is what you should be removing. And at the end of the day, like we need a robust variety of all the macronutrients in a different, you know, capacity for each of our bodies, all the micronutrients possible, right, in a different capacity for our bodies. Like it all matters for our longevity health, for our energy, for body comp change, and so much more. And so I love that you're talking about how we need to be looking at this picture in a robust way, because that's what matters for how we really nurture our well-being over time. And so it's so good.
And I see, like, I have my clients tracking for me consistently. And I had a client the other day, she's like, oh my gosh, I went over my sugar for today. And I said, yeah, because you had an apple and some berries and, you know, you had a little bit of honey in your tea. I'm like, don't worry about the sugar.
Yeah.
Worry about the source of it. Now, if you're eating Snickers bars and Reese cups all day, every day, I might be throwing up the red flag, like,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, we can have fruits and veg. There's the micronutrients,
Yeah.
there's the fiber, there's all the other benefits of having those foods. And I think fruit has gotten this very controversial reputation over the years. People either love it or hate it. And
Yeah.
I just could never recommend somebody stop eating fruit. Like, it just doesn't
Yeah.
ethically sit with me. It's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So,
No, I am in the same camp. And you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's always about evaluating the source. And it's always about evaluating like the balance of it all in our daily regimen. Like, that is what matters. Like, how we're consistently balancing things and trying to get a variety of different things to fuel our bodies. Like, that's the name of the game. But getting overly drilled down on one thing, like, I know that's so common. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that because, we've talked a lot about nutrition here. We've talked a lot about, understanding the basics of macronutrients and getting a variety of different kinds of things into your body for different levels of fuel. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about maybe the training side and the mindset side when it comes to midlife health, because that's also a part of the puzzle, right? Especially when we're thinking about body composition change or frustration that we feel. Like, I know for me, it was just this alarming shift in my body fat mass that was really hard to understand. And I know this is so real because hormonal fluctuations are a big player in why all of this is happening. So talk a little bit about those other components to wellness and how they play a role too.
Yeah, I think the mindset piece is so important. And I'm sure you feel this way sometimes too. But in this space, we're talking so much about emotions and psychology. Sometimes I feel more like a therapist than a nutrition coach, but it is real. And you don't want to feel like you have to accept something you're not happy about. And I think you have to step back and say, am I doing absolutely everything in my power to change the situation I'm frustrated by?
Yeah.
And if you are, you're training consistently and you're being mindful about food and you're sleeping and you're trying to manage stress as best you can and you're getting rid of all the noise and the clutter that's derailing you, at that point, you just do have to find this space of acceptance of my body isn't going to be what it was. Can I find a comfort and confidence in this body that I have now?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But when I say comparison steals your joy, it's not just comparison to Aaron or comparison to your sister. It's comparison to former self.
Yep.
That can be just as detrimental to motivation or confidence. And so I think the mindset just has to be, I'm in this space now. Am I doing everything can I control the controllables? Am I making the best choices I can to optimize my health and my performance? And I think if we start to stress about the things we can't change and the things we can't control, gosh, that's a deep rabbit hole because there's no answer there. You cannot control all the things that your body is going to do over the course of its life, whether that's injury or body fat distribution or sickness or what happens after you have babies or you had to have a C-section. And so you're maybe never going to have a flat tummy again because you don't have the musculature. I mean, there's so many things that we fight and we drive ourselves crazy and we simply can't change them. And so I do think acceptance is one. And I do think stress is something we don't always look at as related to body fat gain or body changes. And man, have I seen an impact of stress over the last several years with clients. And as soon as that stressor is removed, whether it's a aging parent, whether it's kids situations, life, job transitions, and when they're removed for whatever reason, body fat starts coming down.
Yeah.
And so I think looking at stress in your life, and high achievers, we don't always recognize stress. We're not as sensitive to it because it's normal. Like I often don't know I'm stressed until my mom's like, Tiff, you're stressed. I'm like, am I?
Am I? Are you sure?
Is this stress? Like, this is not normal. Like,
oh my gosh.
Too, sometimes like I think both of us work with very successful, high achieving people. And I think they need somebody sometimes to say, you got a lot of stress going on, like give yourself a little grace. And they're like, oh, I really do. I didn't even think about all the things.
Yeah.
So I think that's stress and just mindset shift are so important.
So important. And you're hitting the nail on the head for so many women, because we don't always recognize the level of mental and emotional weight we're carrying around. And that affects our overall well-being, and we just don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And I know, like, even in my personal journey, like, I've had to really understand how to stress manage effectively for my day-to-day life, but also assess like the lifestyle habits I was leaning on that were essentially potentially adding more stress to my stressed out bucket.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for women, especially in this hormonal chaos season of midlife. Like, we have to be looking at our health and our daily, responsibilities through this stress lens of asking ourselves, like, am I unnecessarily adding more stress to my life through trying to take care of my health? And if I am, what do I need to adjust in order to make sure that I'm really nurturing my physiology with intention? Because it can quickly backfire. And you spoke to that with the clients that you've seen or the people that you've talked to over the years. Stress just can add up in tremendous ways in our health journey, for sure.
It really can. And I think certain things that are stress, people don't even always recognize as stress. Like a calorie deficit is stress. If
Yep.
you're not eating at least at maintenance, even if it's moderate and it's not causing any disruption to anything, I mean, it can be causing emotional disruption, right? So even if you're not seeing the scale move and you're thinking, I'm not in a calorie deficit, but you're restricting food, our body's going to prioritize vital functioning.
Yep.
Right? Emotional regulation is not vital. Digestion is not vital. Sleep is not vital. So it's going to pull from all those systems to prioritize brain function and heart beating and lungs breathing. And so you may not even know what's happening at a deep cellular internal level, bone density, muscle. All these things are being pulled from to give you the energy that you're not eating through your diet. And so that can really impact stress and cortisol levels and recovery. And these high intensity workouts are stress. Good stress until they're not, until you're not recovering. And you might just need to be really aware, if I'm in a really stressful season, maybe this is the season for yoga and walking, low intensity strength training. You can have an ebb and flow of your workouts and eat at maintenance. You can see and step back and say, right now, I don't need more stress.
Right.
I need to modify, and I can go back to that once this season passes. I had a client just this week, her mom fell unexpectedly, and they were just about to move both her parents into an assisted living. So they're now in the middle of moving while her mom is recovering in the hospital, and she's trying to manage all this. Wow. And she came in, and her two daughters had just come home from college. They're both like freshmen, sophomores in college, and she's got girls coming home for the summer. Mom fell. They're trying to move this house. The dad's all stressed out. And she came in and we didn't see a lot of progress the last couple of weeks. And she's like, well, maybe I should just start eating less. I'm like, this is not the time. Like, we need to eat more. You need to be fully functioning, managing stress, all these things. I said, let's shift our goals for right now. Let's just get through this, maintain, don't put extra stress on yourself. But it's, I think sometimes too, in those moments of stress, you want to control, well, if I just dialed in my diet, that would feel like I'm controlling something. And I think we have to release that too a little bit.
The most profound thing you just said was, now is not the time. Like, that is something that women need to embrace more and more, because we all manage a tremendous amount in our lives. And we really haven't given ourselves enough permission to embrace the depth of that. And there are seasons when, if we're not paying attention enough, our lifestyle habits or the ways that we're trying to take care of ourselves will actually start to backfire. And I speak from direct experience, someone who went through really deep levels of burnout, trying to just do all the things and continue on with like my intense training because I thought that's what I needed as a stress release. And at the end of the day, it was completely putting my body backwards even more. And so I love that you just said those words, like, now is not the time, and like really giving yourself the space to say that and adjust goals, adjust habits, adjust routines, figure out what's actually going to nurture you with where you're at, because that is the name of the game when it comes to like really working with our female physiology and getting to a place of getting results and feeling energized. Like, we have to be paying attention to that. So I love that you said that, Dr. Tiff.
Well, and I think I want people to be self-aware enough that if they have a coach that's pushing them to stay in that space and pushing them to work out harder or pushing them to stay in their diet mentality, then you've got to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
And so, it's hard when someone's paying me for a specific result, but I just care more about their health and their long-term success than that they're going to be upset for 2 weeks that they didn't lose any body fat, Right. And so sometimes I've got to talk them off the cliff, but I'm also very acutely aware that they want to lose this weight. Yeah. But it's not worth it to me to see that downward spiral.
Yeah, the downward spiral is it's heartbreaking. And I think, for all of us as women, especially if we're in the health space, like, we all have some level of a personal story that we've probably experienced related to a downward spiral, related to something feeling really hard in our own personal journey. And that's why we have this kind of pay it forward mentality, because we want other people to really understand the depth of, what's really going to serve you best. And I know in the women's health space, like, we're always being bombarded with the next thing to make us smaller, the best way to lose weight, the best way to get to the body composition you once had. And while goals like that are amazing and something that we can always be striving for, we have to be smart about how we're actually trying to get to those places. And remember that holistic health is in the name of the game. We always have to be addressing like the mental and emotional component alongside the physical goals that we might be striving for. And I know that you've seen that in the work you do, Dr. Tiff, especially with high achievers who have big goals, but are also trying to balance a big life and figure out like what's actually going to help them move forward. Talk a little bit about like what that has looked like in the conversations you've had and how you actually help people through kind of managing these big levels of goals versus life versus health, et cetera.
I think that people don't realize that the loftier your goals and the higher your achievements can be, you've got to fuel that. Yeah. Right? You've got to keep 3 points of contact while you're climbing that mountain. And that's your nutrition. That's your healthy connections and relationships. That's faith. Like, you've got to keep a stronghold and a strong foothold on the things that are essential. And if you lose those in the process, you're going to fall no matter how high you climb. And so I think that's what I always am trying to continue to reiterate with clients is the more you're trying to achieve and the more demand is going to be on you. And that's when you need to be the most resilient, strongest, best fueled version of yourself, because you've got to be able to withstand all of that. And I think when people put more and more on their plate and they're climbing higher and higher, whether that's in their career or in their personal journey or whatever it may be, we start to forget about all the things that got us there. Yeah. And we start to dismiss the need to sleep, dismiss the need to, eat consistently through the day. We miss more meals because we're in crazy meetings or we're traveling or we've got too much going on with the kiddos and we don't have time for our snack. It's like, you've got to prioritize yourself, and it's not selfish to do that. And I think for moms, especially parents or caregivers, like my nurses, my people in jobs that are more of a giving nature, teachers and nurses, they tend to sacrifice themselves to take care of the others. And then they realize they're not able to take care of the others as well because they're not taking care of themselves. And so, I always say you can't sacrifice health for wealth. Like those have to go together. So
100%. Yeah. Health is wealth. We can't sacrifice one for the other, because to your point, you totally lose yourself. And that's a very real battle that I know a lot of people have to try to work through and manage and find the balance with, because it's very, very easy to start to put some of these foundational pieces on the back burner as we're striving for goals, as we're working towards change or whatever it is in our life. But then we start to realize, like, without those things, we cannot show up as our best selves, and we cannot actually feel good in our day to day. And so one last question, Dr. Tiff, before we kind of wrap up, I'm thinking of the woman that's listening to this that is resonating with a lot of what we're saying. Maybe she's in this season where she's really stressed, but she has this regimen that she's been working towards and working through forever, for decades and decades. And so she's really connected to that. And she feels like it's really the thing that she needs in order to nurture her health and to actually create change or see results. What would you say to her as maybe a best first place to start with kind of really nurturing her physiology with intention in this season and making sure that she's setting herself up for long-term well-being success?
Sure. I mean, I think I would put it back on what would you tell, let's say it's a businesswoman, right? What would you tell your staff? Would you tell them to sacrifice these things?
Yeah.
Would you tell them to skip lunches? Would you tell them to never exercise? Would you tell them to stay up all night and not get the sleep they need to show up?
Yeah.
And if it's a parent we're talking about, would you tell your kids that?
Yeah.
You know, I think we often are so much harder and ask so much more of ourselves, the expectations here, and this from someone who wrote their dissertation on perfectionism.
Yeah.
So I am right there with you,
Yeah.
but like, we have to lower that bar sometimes and say, we deserve as much as we're asking of everyone around us. And so if you're building a team and you're growing that company and you're really pushing and you're wanting to double sales this year and all the things, it's like, if you can't give yourself time to exercise and to get appropriate sleep and to fuel your body, like, you've got to reevaluate before you start chasing that, because it's going to catch up with you.
Yes, 100%. And I think the other thing that we've also kind of talked about here today is, as you're doing those things, like also evaluating what are the lifestyle habits in the season you're in that are actually really going to serve you best. Mm-hmm. So maybe you were in a season where you were doing really intense training and it served you at one point, but now your lifestyle has changed, or now your demands and your stress has changed. And there's other things that you're mentally and emotionally trying to manage. So assessing whether or not your lifestyle is still fitting in with serving where you're at is another big piece to the puzzle. And I know Dr. Tiff and I really believe that on a very deep level, because that is the key for long-term longevity health for women, and really making sure that we're nurturing our physiology and doing what our body needs from the inside out. So Dr. Tiff, I'm so grateful for your amazing perspective today. You know, before we officially wrap up all the way, I do want you to talk a little bit about the book you have coming out at the end of this year. So we talked a little bit before we started recording today about how our additional passion is just continuing to make some of this process inside of women's health a little bit easier, or a little bit more simplified for generations to come. And Dr. Tiff has an amazing book coming out that's focused on preteens. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. So, you know, over the years, I started my career in sports psychology, and I worked with a lot of youth athletes and a lot of parents of youth athletes and coaches. And then I've continued coaching over the years. And so even though my primary clientele is adults, I've always had a lot of that preteen girl in my life. And I just started to really feel like there isn't a legitimate, helpful resource for them as they start to develop their own identity and embrace the God-gifted superpowers that they have, that they need to be courageous to share with the world. And they don't fall into that comparison trap, and they don't fall into that same messaging that we're all now fighting, that somehow our worth and our identity is built on what we do and what we wear and how successful we are. And so this is a training manual for girls ready to embrace their true selves. And I cover faith, and I cover nutrition and movement and taking care of your body and connecting with kindness. And it's just all the things that these girls need to hear. And it's from a very faith-forward perspective, in helping them to really build their identity on a foundation of faith, and that's where our true identity starts. And so it should be out in September, and hopefully you can share the link with your listeners, because it's just going to be, I just think it's going to be such an impactful book for parents and for girls. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you're doing that work, because we've already talked about this, but I know that I feel this all the time. Once we know better, we can do better. And it sounds like, the work that you're doing, Dr. Tiff, in this book and so much more is really the name of the game, is like, how can we really start to rewrite the narratives and change up the messaging and help this be a totally different experience from the inside out for wellness for women as they come up in generations. And so I'm so grateful for you and the incredible work that you're doing. And we will definitely make sure that the show notes has everything linked as far as Dr. Tiff's book and any other way that you can get in touch with her. So Dr. Tiff, will you quickly share how people can also reach out to you if they want to learn more about the work you do, et cetera?
My best way to get in touch with me is my website. It's workwithdrtiff.com. And I'm also on Instagram, and it's just @workwithdrtiff. So either way, I'd love to hear from you guys. I always do a free strategy call. So even if you just want to hop on and ask some questions and learn more about how I operate or just want to visit, I always love that. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Tiff. This has been an amazing discussion. Again, make sure you guys head to the show notes for all the details on how to connect with Dr. Tiff more, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.